program.
Well, I was glad to have you on my program. This is a, pretty important subject to me. I know that there's a lot of religions out there, and, well, I think you and me both know after a little bit of research that can't all of them be the one true path to God. They probably all have a little bit of the way. You just have to figure out which is and which is not. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think people need to know that, because I think they can get a more rounded life with their walk with God if they try to look around in more than just one religion, in other words.
Yeah, and I think in the end, it's going to boil down to an individual choice. I can't see everybody coming into full agreement on which religion or which God is right. So people have to have the freedom to make their own choices. And I myself, I'm all for that. I'm not a religious person myself. Although I do believe in God, I don't believe that man has properly defined God.
Same principle, pardon me, must apply to the story of Jesus' birth, because everybody knows that a virgin does not give birth to a child. They already had one story for agriculture, seed time, harvest, etc. So what would be the purpose for the Christ myth?
Yeah, well now, there's more than one category of mythology, of course. And, I'm going to go and give it one, I would say, a solar explanation of what you just asked. But, of course, there's more than that. I mean, we know that literally a virgin cannot give birth. Going back to the cardinal points, when we look at, for instance, spring, which comes on March 21, now in the mythology, that particular the vernal equinox is looked at as a time of conception. Now we know that with spring, the earth becomes fertile and is ready for planting and so forth. And it's ready, in a sense, to receive insemination, even though we may not start planting right at spring. But that point in the Astro-Mythology, that part of the vernal equinox, it's looked at as a point of insemination, of marriage, if you will. And one part of the Bible is referred to as the bridal chamber in the mythology, and we explain that early within the books. But anyway, if you count 280 days from March 21 to December 25th on your calendar, 280 days, and we know that human gestation is 40 weeks, 280 days. If you count from March 21 to December 25th, that is exactly 280 days. So in the Astro-Mythology, we see the sun, when it crosses the vernal equinox at March 21, this is an act of insemination. The heavens inseminating the sun, the marriage of the Father Son with the heavens, so to speak, so as to produce a child son that is born 280 days, and this is in exact correlation to human gestation on December 25th. And so, that's one very significant correlation there.
Okay, so you might say the myths largely about death and life, birth, death, and maybe even rebirth?
Right. Well, because, that's a very good question, because, like I said, there's more than one application to the symbolism. Now, with Jesus Christ, I don't look upon Jesus Christ as a historical figure at all. I mean, we can't find any consistent, credible evidence outside of the Bible or Quran that Jesus actually ever lived, or that Moses, or that Abraham, or any of these fellows. Like I said, these are these are myths, written in, symbolic stuff. But anyway, in terms of the resurrection, if we look at the cardinal point, the winter solstice at December 22, and we know solstice means stand still, and we can see from December 22 to December 25, when Christ is born. In another phase of the mythology, this actually is referring to the resurrection of the sun, because they looked at the sun when it went into winter solstice. Now that's the lowest point of the sun's trajectory throughout the year, in the winter months of the winter solstice, when it hits the winter solstice. They saw that as the sun going into a grave or into the cave, and it stayed there for 3 days. Now that's a position at either solstice. The sun seems to stay in place 3 days because the solstices are pivoting points. At the lowest point, it hits there, and we can't see its movement back up toward the north until after 3 days. And that was viewed as a resurrection of the sun from the grave of the winter solstice. Now, in the Bible, we have about Jesus being resurrected after 3 days in the grave or cave or what have you. And you can't even find 3 days between being killed on a Friday and resurrected on a Sunday morning. That's about 1.5 or 2 days. But the actual 3 days, that is really symbolism of the sun being resurrected from the position of the winter solstice on December 25th.
Okay. Now, on this here, the astronomical or astrological connection, does that have anything to do with there being 12 tribes and 12 disciples?
Well, yes, indeed. Because now, when we, like you and I were talking a little earlier, before we came on the air, about how when we look back in history at the older religions, they seem to be, in many ways, so similar to what we have today.
Right.
And really, it's because the symbolism hasn't changed. All religions, all of the major religions that I'm aware of, especially monotheism, but not limited to monotheism, they deal with symbolism. In their origination, I'm talking about, they're dealing with the symbolism of the heavens. So this can cause us to find similarity from religion to religion, because they're all symbolic of the same underlying events. So you find in the Old Testament, you find 12 tribes. And, like I said before, this is all mythology. There never was any 12 tribes of Israel. This is just a story that was written up. You can't find any 12 tribes in actual history. I mean, the whole Egyptian slave scenario, so forth, you can't find that in actual history. This stuff comes out of the Bible and Quran. But my point is, you have the 12 tribes of Israel, and this correlates to the 12 signs of the zodiac. And so when you come into the New Testament, you have the 12 apostles. It's the same symbolism. Instead of calling them tribes, I mean, they call them whatever fits the subject matter or the cultural the storyline. They're called apostles. But the 12 apostles, they're symbolizing the 12 zodiac constellation, just like the 12 tribes of Israel was symbolizing the 12 zodiac constellations. It's all the same symbolism.
Okay, so are there any other messages inside of this that we're unaware of?
I tell you now, one thing that comes to my mind that I can mention kind of briefly as to give another example of the type of things we interpret with my books. And like I say, I can just give you an overview because this is really kind of convoluted in a way when you don't have charts and graphs. Within my books, I provide charts and graphs to help the explanation. And of course here, right now, we're just dealing with words, and so things can't be as clear. But now, in Genesis of the Bible, for instance, we're told that God created the world in 7 days. Was 6 days of work, and he rested on the seventh day. Now, that well, you know, like I said, it's plain mythology, so I should not have to prove that it's mythology, but I mean, whoever witnessed God doing that, of course, we're told that it's a revelation from God to Moses, I guess. But really, that the 7-day creation period, or the 6-day creation, 6 days of rest, it itself has potent symbolism referring to the keeping of time, to tracking time. As I said, this whole religious thing, not that it was planned that way, it started with tracking time. It started with astronomy, tracking time, then mythology evolved from astronomy as a symbolic way to keep the records of tracking time. And then when religion finally evolved, it took on the aspects of the mythology and just changed the names of the angels and demons of mythology into the prophets and angels and so forth, and devils, what have you, of religion. It's just a changing of name of the same subjects, as we just discussed with the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles, all referring to the 12 signs of the zodiac. But anyway, the actual what the creation story in Genesis is actually describing the commencement of the Hebrew calendar system, and the 6 periods of creation is actually referring to their dividing the cycle of the moon into 6 segments and a 7th segment where it rests. You know, we say that God worked for 6 days and he rested on the 7th day. This actually refers to the moon god sign, S-I-N. This is what the name of the moon god. I mean, the Semitic people, historically, anciently, I mean, and even today it holds over, they were worshipers of the moon god. You know, some people worship the sun god. They worship the moon god. The Semitic people, that includes the Arabs, the Jews, the Akkadians, who ruled the land of the Mesopotamian area there about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, whenever it was. These were Semitic people, and they worshiped the moon god sign. And this moon god refers to the moon. So, the God working 6 days and resting on the 7th, and like I say, I'm just giving an overview. A detailed explanation of this, I believe, is in Book 3, the first chapter of Book 3. But the resting period where God rests, I prove with all the provided information on the cycles of the moon and so forth. This is actually referring to when the moon rests, which it rests for, it goes into darkness, 2 days and 5 hours and 11 minutes and 20 seconds of every cycle. The moon goes into darkness, whereas we can't see its light. That was referred to as resting. And now you notice if you read this portion of Genesis about creation, some people think that the editors made a mistake, but on the first day of creation, God created light. But then, on the fourth day of creation, God created light again. It says that God created the sun and the moon on the fourth day of creation. Well, it started off on the first day it created light. But the point is, they didn't make a mistake. This is right in accord with the symbolism. Because they're talking about, in this scenario, the phases of the moon. The moon begins with the new moon, which is the first sliver of light. And after the moon progresses, waxes in its light, as they say, from the first stage to a middle stage to the last stage, it hits the fourth stage, or the beginning of the fourth stage, where it is a full moon. So in this, you have the first creation of light given to you in Genesis, the occurring on the first day, and the fourth day, light being created all over again. That is referring to the new moon on the first day and the full moon on the fourth day. And then on through the fifth and sixth day, God rested. Why? Because that's when the cycle ends and the moon goes into darkness, into a resting period that lasts 2.5 days. And like all the details, like I said, are given in my book. And in fact, even the Jews themselves have provided us with so much data on this. It's easy to prove what I've just given an overview of, because they set the beginning of creation of the world at 3,761 BC on a Monday, Jewish time, at 5 hours, 11 minutes, and 20 seconds, which in our mode of keeping time, it would be 11 p.m. And 11 minutes and 20 seconds on a Sunday. But with them, of course, their day beginning at 6 o'clock in the evening, this is their Monday. But their records of creation, as they give it in their religious teaching, take us back to that time, to the exact date and day. In fact, they give the date of this creation as a time equivalent to October 7th, as I said, on a Monday. But anyway, when you check the star charts for that date, you can actually see that that date is the date of when the new moon appeared in 3,761 BC. This creation story, that's what it's describing. The beginning of their calendar system with the new moon of 3,761 BC on a Monday Jewish time at 5 hours and 204 parts of halakam, if I'm saying it right. They use the term halakam. It's derived from a helic, which covers 3 and a third seconds. But anyway, that's just further cooperation. Once your audience choose to read that, they'll find the details, graphs, and all the proofs that show that this thing that we call religion, it can be traced back to the tracking of time. And the various myths or stories in the Bible are really symbolic tales of astronomical interactions.